I'm an alcoholic. My name's John. You think it was hot while you were trying to do the readings. Come up here and do this. One other announcement. The marathon starts on the 16th, and we've been doing that for about 20 years here. It'll go from the 16th to the 1st. And it'll basically start at the 7:30 meeting and end at 12 o'clock at night. And we'll try to get that calendar up on the board back behind us. Let's see, I said I was an alcoholic. Try to get all this junk out of the way. I have a sponsor, and believe it or not, my sponsor has a sponsor. And if you don't know who my sponsor is, Neil's my sponsor, so it's sort of a weird thing for him to have a sponsor as much time as he's got, but he does have one. I came into these rooms in February the 25th, 1987, which makes I did it. It's not that I'm counting or anything. But I basically have 11,235 days, but who's counting? So I really didn't think much about it. I thought about it Friday while I was taking a shower, and I thought about it a little bit today. While I was walking our dog. And I want to say a couple things. When I had about 5 years, I got to speak up here. And back then they had a treatment center at Pinehurst and everything. So the room, we didn't have tables, so the room was full of chairs, and the whole back of the room is where the treatment center. So I was about 15 minutes into talking, and the whole back of the room got up and left. And I was like, at 5 years, I'm way, way, way still self-centered. And I thought that was all about me, and what I found out was one of the treatment center people had a reaction and everything. They had to take everybody with them. I'm still self-centered today. I'm not as self-centered as the day I walked in here, and I'm not as self-centered as I was when I was 2 years old. After I came in these rooms for a while in that, I happened to have the opportunity to talk to my mom and everything, and sort of ask her how I was as a kid and all that kind of stuff. And she sort of shocked me. She told me that when I was about 2, she literally had to quit smoking and quit drinking because of me, because I was that wild. I demanded that much attention, and I was just zooming all around the place, going, doing, and I was a handful. And she never started drinking again and never started smoking again, because I remained a handful until I was in these rooms, probably for anywhere from 5 to 8 years. I was still a handful. So my parents, my dad was in the Air Force, and when he retired here, he moved back here. Before then, I was about 8 years old when I moved here. Before then, I'd already been around the world a couple times, which I'm grateful for, because what it gave me is a couple things. One, I don't know that I really had the disease of alcoholism until I moved here into this area, because I personally, as I look back on my life, I thought I had a normal childhood. I really didn't have a whole lot of problems. Yeah, I was probably self-centered, probably like most kids, and that. I had an older sister, which was she's 7 years older than I am, so there's quite a difference in our age. And by the time I was 10, she was basically leaving high school. So we moved here, and within about a year, my alcoholism and my drug addiction started taking off. They recommended that I go see a doctor, and at that time, doctors didn't mind giving kids a whole bunch of drugs, and so I started using a whole bunch of drugs. At the same time, my dad, when he retired, I think he was pissed off at the military, and he did a lot of drinking. I can't say my dad was an alcoholic, but I can damn sure tell you he was a drunk. And he wasn't a very pleasant drunk to his family. Now, if you knew him outside of the family, he was probably one of the greatest people you'll ever know. And I've talked to lots of people that met him and everything, and they said he was a great guy. But he was a son of a bitch in our family. He raised all kinds of havoc. The sad part about it was, as a kid, I said I wasn't going to do that, and I turned out to be exactly like him. I started taking off. I started drinking a lot. By the time I was I think I was 11 years old when I went to my first AA meeting, and they took me to Rockingham. And I walked into a room that had maybe 6 or 8 people in it, and they looked like, everybody in that room looked like they were about at least 100 years old. And so I went to that meeting about 3 or 4 times, and that was it. I couldn't do it again. I wish I had stayed. It probably would have helped me a whole lot. But what it did is basically, I did all the normal stuff that that kids did at that age. They shipped me off to military school. I came back. I did just as much at military school as I did here. Probably learned a lot at military school, how to get high and get drunk and everything. I came back here and just kept more havoc and more havoc and more trouble and more trouble. The only 2 people that are here that probably know me from my past is Shannon and Joey. And hopefully they can't say too many bad things about me. I'm sure they can say some stuff. Me and Shannon are in competition to see who can marry the most times. The only thing I haven't done is marry the same person twice. So, before I walked in here, I had 5 DWIs, or DWIs, like it was called back then. And I'd been married 4 times. I had totaled 12 cars. I had actually spent more time without a license than I had a license. Still kept driving. The police weren't really that bad. I mean, you could walk out of blowing a 25 or a 30, as long as you didn't have a wreck with somebody else and cause anybody to get majorly hurt. They just sort of packed you up and brushed you off and wrote you a ticket, and you'd get it written off as careless and reckless and move on. It was the 70s and 80s and that, and everything was okay. Drugs were probably were more prevalent in my history than alcohol was. I did everything that everybody does today. We just called it different names, and we put it in our bodies in different ways. When my alcoholism started taking off and what really started happening was that 100,575,223 thoughts per second was going from one side of my brain to another. And I could never keep my head I couldn't get my head to shut up. And I was a nervous wreck, and fear inundated my life constantly. We talked about fear last night at the meeting and everything, and fear ruled my life. And the only way I could get fear away from me is to get high, get drunk. And I stayed that way. I basically stayed drunk from the time that I started until the time I quit. I had a couple 6 months or a year in there that I did it out of sheer willpower and didn't do anything. I graduated high school and don't even remember going to the graduation, and basically woke up in Florida about 3 days later, and lived down there for 2 years and didn't even call my parents. So they had to freak out. That's just the type of person I was. Got out of there, worked down there for a couple years, and what I did while growing up and most of my life is my family had a farm, so basically I learned how to farm. So from spring until October, I farmed. And then from October until Stony Brook, I went someplace and did construction work. Construction work is a good place to feed an alcoholic. You can make a lot of money and you can spend it in a lot of different ways. And back then they really didn't care if you were drinking on the job and doing other stuff on the job, as long as you could do your job. And like most alcoholics, I excelled at my job because I didn't want anybody sticking their nose into what I was doing, because if they got too close, they'd find out how drunk and how high I was. So you do real good at it, and that way nobody bothers you. I don't remember really losing that many jobs to being drunk. I do remember losing a lot of jobs because I just didn't care and wouldn't show up or go, you know what? I'd get drunk and meet some people or whatever, and we'll go someplace else and work. We'll go out to Texas, or we'll go out to Arizona, or we'll go back to Florida or Alabama or Virginia or New York or wherever I went, and just leave. And maybe the paycheck would catch up, and maybe it wouldn't. But what I always did, like I said, is I would always come back at Stony Brook. Stony Brook was a good milestone and for here, and if you lived around here, you know what it is. And they used to advertise it as the largest cocktail party on the East Coast, and that's what it was. So. My personal relationships with people were, at best, difficult. And part of that was because of my drinking and using, my fear, and the fact that the moment I started getting close to somebody or whatever, is I'd leave and go someplace else and work. And marriage is not one of those things that lasts very long when you're not there. And the more you're not there, the shorter it keeps getting. So I use that a lot. I I was probably pretty much of an asshole while I was married. That doesn't help. My drinking was all the time, like I was talking about. I basically did all that, until I came into these rooms. My last couple of years, we are also I was at a meeting the other night, and they were talking about God's will or my will and stuff like that, and I think way too much, and they also said, somebody was saying that they felt really bad about a lot of the decisions they made. They made a lot of bad decisions. What my alcoholism and that did is made me make a lot of stupid decisions. I don't know that they're, when I look back at the decisions that I've made up to this day, I don't know if they were bad decisions or not, because the decisions I did got me here. Some of the worst, or some of the things that I would think are the stupidest decisions I've ever made in my life have turned out to be the best decisions. They were agonizingly painful at the time. It's agonizingly painful to go through a divorce, but it has always turned out good since the day I walked into these rooms. Having a company and losing that company, or the company not making it, was a crazy decision at the time when we created the company and everything, and it may have been a bad decision at the time when we folded it, but it's been the best decision, one of the best decisions I ever did. So I can tell you a whole lot of crazy stuff that I did and everything, and everybody in this room has done crazy stuff. So as you can tell, getting married that many times, you do crazy stuff. Having that many car wrecks, you do a lot of crazy stuff. And being in as many states and everything that I've been in, you do a lot of crazy stuff. The sad part about it is, once I came inside these rooms, I continued to do crazy things. And I had sponsors, and I had sponsees, and I would go to meetings, and I read the book, and I did the steps, and all that stuff multiple times. And I still continued to do insane things. And, coming in a room doesn't stop me from doing insane things. Hopefully my choices have improved over the years. I've had a lot of people in these rooms be mad at me. I've pissed off a lot of people in these rooms. I have seen a lot of people in these rooms go out and use. I've seen people in these rooms die, kill themselves, and do all kinds of other stuff. I've been very super fortunate that one of the few things that I haven't done or do is to drink and use again. Suicide has been an up and down thing in my life since the day I walked in these rooms, and personally I believe is the moment I lose my faith, suicide starts to be an option. When you're in these rooms and you're going through a divorce, it gets crazy. It's easy to be in these rooms and your first second year and everything, and you can't touch your ass with a 10-foot 2x4 because you're walking on clouds. But when all the clouds go away and you're trying to eke your way through life and it ain't working, and you go, because I don't know about you guys, but I know what my next best option is. My next best option is I can get drunk. I can get high, just like that. And then I don't want to do that, so what's my next best option? So my last option, what it has always been for a long time while I was in these rooms, is to get more involved, to ask for help. I have refused to ask for help more times in this room than I ever have outside of these rooms. It's insane. It's a sad state of my life to where I know what the key for recovery is, and I continue not to do it. My life is not bad. I'm not up here saying it's all bad, gloom and doom and everything else. I've got a great life and everything. It's just that internal struggles that I have inside my head. I came in here and scared to death. I think I weighed about 100 and maybe between 106 and 110 pounds. I was doing large amounts of alcohol and large amounts of cocaine and meth and everything. And my last life was, I had a farm at the time way out on the other side of Hoffman, and it was about 2 miles down a county clay road, and then there was a gate at the beginning of my property, and then there was a mile from that gate to my house, and I would keep the gate locked, and I would keep the doors in my house locked, and I would be inside the bathroom with the bathroom door locked, and just be so trashed that I was talking to somebody the other day, and they didn't understand it because they don't have anything to do with it, but I would literally meet myself on the way in and out of my house because I didn't keep anything in the house. I always kept it outside. So I was constantly going outside of the house and coming back in. And I would literally meet myself coming back in and going back out because I couldn't get enough in me. I never could get enough in me. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter whether I had tons of it or none, hardly. It was absolutely insanity. The year before I came into these rooms, the year before I came in these rooms, I was in Austin, Texas, and we were building a couple schools and working on a hospital and a treatment center down there, and that was funny because we worked on this treatment center on Sunday and everything, and the guys that I was living with, we had this big old house and that, and there were 6 of us, and we were all making killer money, all the overtime you wanted and all the money you get paid, and we couldn't keep the lights on, and we couldn't keep the gas on, and we couldn't pay the landlord, and couldn't keep the telephone on. We kept them on because we're construction workers. So, we just jumped the pole out, They'd take the transformer and we'd feed it in hot, and they'd take the gas meter out and we'd just bypass it and put pipe on it and, do what we needed to do and everything. And they'd keep on going further on down the street and we'd just keep on doing it. But we couldn't even do it. We couldn't even pay our own way. The wild part, what I was going to say is, so we'd work there at that treatment center on Sunday, and we'd hide stuff in the walls for the inmates that were going to be in there. There's still liquor, I'm sure, inside the walls and pot and everything else in there. Stupid stuff. But out of those 6 people, within the first in that year, 5 people went to treatment. I was the only person that didn't go to treatment. Out of those 6 people, as far as I know, only 1 person has stayed sober. Every one of those people are dead today. Bob, who used to be a running mate of mine, lived here, Bob Archibald, and great guy. Couldn't stay sober for nothing. All brilliant as you could get, as smart as you could get, but couldn't stay sober. Always had an excuse. Always had a reason why not to. Loved him to death. Just killed me when he died. I've had a lot of good friends die of this disease. This disease does not care. This disease does not care about me, much less anybody else. So I come into these rooms and I start coming in down here at Aberdeen, and I don't fit. My hair's down to about here. When I was back in the 70s, my hair was longer than Shannon's. It was about waist length and that. And so I didn't fit in here with a bunch of, excuse my expression, I hope I don't offend anybody, but a bunch of Yankees golfers. Yeah. You know, that was what was here at the time. There wasn't very many good old boys here. There were a few, but there wasn't a lot. But Mac Bibbins was here. He used to run the halfway house over across the railroad track and that before he died and that. And I guess I was about 9 months or something like that sober, and or 9 months dry basically. And this meeting on a Tuesday night was a discussion meeting, but what happened was the discussion leader would pick the first person to speak, and that person would pick another person to speak. And somebody, I don't know if they actually picked me or if they said John, and my ego took over and I started talking. It was probably somebody said John and my ego took over and I started talking. And I was talking, and Mac interrupted me and that and said, you need to shut up. You don't know nothing about being sober. You got about whatever length of time I had at the time, and that's about all you know. You don't know anything about it. You need to listen and learn how to stay sober. And that was my first big resentment in AA. But what I did do was I told him right after he got through saying it, I told him, I said, look, you old blankety blank, I'm going to outlive you. And I'll be here when they bury you, and I'll still be sober. The sad part about that statement is that's what happened. He died several years ago and became one of my best friends, and had a lot of great knowledge. Took me over to Primary Purpose when Primary Purpose first started, because at that time I had been going to NA for about 10 years, because I copped that resentment, so I couldn't stay in here very much. So I had to go to another fellowship in that, and so I went there, and what was happening there was I started getting more time than everybody else. I had more time than everybody else in there, and everybody else was looking to me like I knew something. I didn't know nothing. Most of the time I was hanging on by my fingernails and my toes. I just wasn't doing it. So he took me over to Primary Purpose, and his reasoning for taking me over to Primary Purpose, he says, I'm going to take you over to a meeting that's got more time than you'll ever have. And there's more egos in that room than you ever need. And so me and him started going to that meeting. He went to that meeting with me, and he did it maybe for himself, and I know he did it for me, but he took me there for over 9 months before I felt comfortable enough about going there by myself. So I'm in here, and I'm doing the deal, and my first year and a half or something like that, I was still dealing. So I wasn't sober. No, I had ethics, though. You know, I wouldn't sell to anybody in the rooms. I just sold to my friends. You know, I've learned that there are people in these rooms that do sell to people in these rooms, but I wasn't one of them. So anyway, and a friend of mine asked me to come to their wedding and supply them, and so that's what I did. And actually, I came to this. It was a Saturday night meeting. I came to the Saturday night meeting and went over to the Pinehurst Hotel and met them after the wedding, and got everybody high and all that good stuff. And then about 11 or 12 o'clock, they'd left and that, and she came walking back in there and wanted some more Coke and everything. And about 2 minutes after that, her new husband came walking in the door. And he said, Leanne, you know, you need to come on. You don't need to be doing this shit. And she cussed him out up one side and up down the other. And it woke me up. And I'm so grateful for that to happen, because what it did is it woke me up. It made me realize that was me. That was me. I couldn't get enough. And my marriage wouldn't survive. Nothing would survive. Even though I wasn't doing it. You know, I was going to do it if I kept on doing what I was doing. It's just a matter of time. So that's my thing on that. Now I'm in these rooms, and I had been divorced from my fourth wife for 5 years, and that 5 years was a tremendous amount of hell. I went and did things and drank and used and woke up in places and all kinds of stuff that I never thought I'd do, and I did it. She had come into these rooms right after we'd gotten divorced. We'd had a son together, and in that 5 years, I had weekend custody of our son. So being a good alcoholic, you know, what you do at the beginning is you go and pick up your son and you don't drink that night or that morning when you go pick up your son on Saturday morning. But, you know, that doesn't last very long, so you start drinking. You start picking them up, and you're drunk. Or you're throwing up on the steps as you're, you know, just before you ring the doorbell. You pick them up and you take them back home and everything, and you pass out. Not all the time, but part of the time you pass out and he's waking you up, you know. He's 4 or 5, 6, waking you up, wanting, hey, come on, let's go play, let's do this, let's do that. A little bit. So, never said a word to me. So I come in these rooms and I had the opportunity, I don't know, maybe the second year, something like that, to ask her how she did that. And she said, well, I did a lot of praying. And I prayed that something would happen for you to wake up and come and quit drinking and that. She said, I hoped that nothing would happen to our son. And she sort of left it at that. I don't know that I have, to this day, don't have that ability to be that, to give God that kind of permission to give somebody else the opportunity to wake up. So I'm grateful that nothing happened. You know, what happened was that I was shacked up with some alcoholette, and she wanted to go to treatment, and I said, hey, I know how you can do that. And So she went to treatment, and I realized that she couldn't, the stupidity on my part, but I realized that she couldn't come back to the house and me still be drinking and using. So I said, I'll quit. And that's how I started this long road. So I'm in these rooms, and I didn't go to treatment. I didn't go to halfway house. And I'm going to meetings. My first sponsor was Augustine Hernandez. This guy had tattoos on his eyelids and on his tongue. And this guy was tough. He was insane, but he was tough. I actually, about 5 years ago, got to the opportunity to meet his granddaughter. Was at an NA meeting, and she's inside these rooms. And he died of Hep C about 10 years ago, about 15 years ago, I guess now. But he taught me a lot. You know, he taught me how to go to meetings and how to find meetings and how to do what you need to do on a daily basis. And that's just you don't drink, you don't use, and you hold on to the seat of your pants. He also taught me that it's more important to save my ass than it was to save my face. And it was more important for you guys to know all the crap that's going on in my life than it is for me to hide it. The more secrets I have, the sicker I get, and the sicker I get, the closer I am to drinking again. So I'm doing all this stuff and everything, and I find this next victim in my life, and I marry her. I married my son's mother. Me and her were at Joe's After Hours Club in Southern Pines when we were still using and everything. And I married her because she was stealing a friend of mine's car, you know, and that's why I married her. I married my next wife because I saw a patient die at a hospital where I was working at after I'd been sober here. So I was 10 years sober at that time. And I saw this guy die there, and he was crying out. He didn't have anybody to come. He didn't know anybody. And he laid there and died. And I realized that this young lady that I'd been dating, I decided I didn't want to die alone. And so we got married. And it was against all my intuition to marry this person, because all the red lights were there and saying, don't marry this person, don't marry this person. And I did it anyway. And we had a bunch of good years. She was inside these rooms and that, and I'm a firm believer that it doesn't matter if, I think you should get in relationships. Don't get in relationships the first year is treatment center crap. If you're living and you're breathing and you're talking to another person, you're in a relationship. And the sooner you learn how to get through it, the better off you're going to be. Now, one or two things is going to happen. Either you're going to use or you're not going to use. Either the person that you're in a relationship, if they're inside these rooms, they're either going to use or they're not going to use. That's it. You know, hopefully nobody dies. But it's no guarantee. People out there have the same problems. So we have a somewhat good relationship for a fair amount of years in that, and she starts drinking and using again, and she can't stop, and she goes to treatment, and we send her to treatment after treatment, and she can't stop, and she can't stop, and she can't stop, and the lying and conniving and cheating and all this other stuff goes on, and my head just keeps spinning, and I'm getting sicker, and I'm getting sicker. And I'm still inside these rooms, And I'm still telling people about it. And everybody's going, yep, 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 yep. You know, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You know? And I'm still dealing with it and trying to, you know. And what happens is you start lying for the other person. You start covering up for the other person. You start imposing your will, not God's will. You do the same thing I did when I was a kid. You pull the keys out, don't let them drive, just like I did to my dad when he was drunk. You know, you beg them, you plead, you do this. Hopefully you don't get too sick and you don't join them, because that's a great option. So we get divorced. It wasn't fun on my behalf, and darn sure wasn't fun on her behalf. Made a lot of people and some people in these rooms mad, and some people, I don't know what it did. And to be honest with you, I don't care. So at that same time, I was in the midst of being investigated by the FBI for fraudulent bid rigging on a military base. And when you're 20 years sober and the FBI come knocking at your door, your asshole still puckers. And you don't know what to do. And the charges were false. It just happened. There was another person that had some. They weren't working a very good spiritual program, and made a lot of false allegations and got a lot of people in trouble. But by the time you go through the courts and you pay the lawyers and you do this and do that, and they figure out that the person just made it all up, things happen. Lives are destroyed. So that's going on. I used to say I lost my wife, and I lost my business, and I lost my house. I didn't lose any of them. I know where every one of those things are at. My wife decided that she didn't want to go to treatment when I gave her the opportunity the last day that we were living together, and I said, you can go to treatment or you got to go, and she got her clothes and she left. My business went away because we ran out of money. My house went away because I couldn't pay the mortgage. That's not a good thing. It's fun. What do? You get scared, you cry, you beg and plead with the people around you, you share, and you hope like hell you don't drink. You know, I didn't drink. It's an absolute miracle that the people around me, like AJ and Neil and a bunch of women and older women and a bunch of other people just surrounded me and told me it's going to be all right. Even though I couldn't see this far in front of me. I couldn't find all right. And so I would get up and just trudge through the day. And it got better. And it continued to get better. My life's good today. I'm building a new house. I'm married again. I've got a new job. I got a job that if I'd decided when I was a kid that I had wanted, I couldn't have got this kind of job. The job that I've got today is the best thing one of the best things that's ever happened to me. The person that I'm married to is a great person. It's actually a beautiful marriage. She's about 1,200 miles away from me. She has a house, and I have a house down here. not necessarily by her choice that she's that far away, and not by my choice that she's that far away, but that's just part of what we have going on in our lives today. We see each other as often as we can. Life's good. I try real hard not to think too much. One of my biggest problems is myself and my self-centeredness. Just because I have almost 31 years doesn't mean that I'm not going to go like this to you. And I'll keep you as far away from me as I can. Because I don't want to share my shit. I don't want you to know what's good, bad, or indifferent about me. I have a couple sponsees, and some of my sponsees have got 8, 9, 10 years, and one's got like 20. Poor Carl, he can't keep sober, but he's got about a year again. I don't know if I'm going to sponsor her anymore or not. He's been in and out so many times. I don't think he's asked me this last time. I think he's got somebody else, but we're good friends, and we go out and eat, and he shares his problems and all that kind of stuff with me. It's important to me to be a part of this program. And as bad as I may push you away, if I see that you're in trouble, I'm going to come up and talk to you. And you may not like what I'm going to tell you. But I'm going to tell you anyway. And hopefully you'll wake up and you won't go out and drink, because that's the most important thing here. I hope that nobody thinks that it's all doom and gloom once you got here, but what I'm trying to do is tell you the reality. It's easy to do it when it's real good and fine and everything's hunky-dory, but it's hard to do when things are hitting, when things are real and you don't have any other options. So it's 9 o'clock. Thank you all for asking me. Bye.